And
Hello.
we're back. It is part three of five positions. We are in the middle ground. We are a small forward. And this so far, our list has been very interesting. We've seen Mr. Giannis not going to try the last name again at number one at power forward.
Antetokounmpo.
There you go. And at number one at center, we had Mr. Big Honey himself, Nikola Yocic.
Oh, we're learning how to say his name. Good look at that. Take
Hope,
note, people.
hopefully. But we're going to get into the small forwards at number 25. Before we do, like,
Yep.
subscribe, help us out. We definitely appreciate it. Like we said, we have entire lists from power forward and center. You can check them out as well. But here we go, number 25. Who do we have?
At number 25, we have someone who actually hasn't played for his team yet. He's been there since last February. We have Justice Winslow, who's only ever played in Miami, but got traded to Memphis in that Iggy Iguodala trade, and then got hurt and hasn't played, and he'll miss the start of the season. But he still makes our top 25.
Yeah, I mean, usually when you're talking about a guy who seems as injury prone as Winslow and he isn't, I guess, a top level talent, it's almost questionable into how he's in the top 25. But it just feels like overall he is a really good player. He's very versatile. He kind of could just do a bit of everything, and he obviously hasn't not only reached his potential, but obviously not had a chance to shown it either, really. So once he gets in there, obviously he's had a couple closer to full years in Miami. But for the most part, I mean, going back to 4 years ago, again, had the injury problems, only played in 15 games, and then again, only playing in five, or sorry, 11 last year, starting in five. So, I mean, again, this is a guy who needs to stay healthy to clearly show he belongs. And then from there, hopefully we could get a better gauge on him, but I still think he definitely belongs in the top 25.
Well, yeah, overall, when he's healthy, he's a great player. He's one of the better defensive small forwards in the league. He's versatile. He can guard any guard, essentially guard most forwards as well. He's someone who's going to move the ball for you. He's going to be, if he's not your lead ball handler, he's a damn good secondary ball handler, which is where he's going to thrive in Memphis. With John Morant there, he's taking the reins most of the time. It's going to be nice to have that. As much as he's not an older player, he has been in the league. This will be his about sixth year. He has been in the league a while. It feels like he's been around for a long time because he's put up decent numbers for his whole career. But he's really enhanced his assists, his rebounds. He's gets in the right spots. He's going to play really good in Memphis if he can get healthy. That's the biggest question.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, overall, looking at it too, very similar to the guy who replaced him, Jimmy Butler, in the sense, like we said, he does everything. Obviously, not as great offensively, or maybe not just
He
the
never had the chance to shine.
exactly. Maybe obviously Jimmy Butler's still
He's
the
not
better
that
player
good.
right
Yeah,
now,
of course.
but I mean they tied with each other for rebounds for third with 6.6 per game, even though Winslow did play limited amount. And with that too, I mean eighth in assists for Winslow among small forwards. So in that regard, that's a guy again who could obviously do all the things he can. Aside from the obviously injury prone thing too, even though again it was limited games, a guy who tends to get a lot of fouls. He was near the top of the league with 3.5 per game last year. Again, just being more disciplined in that regard, but he is aggressive, so it's not something you could always fault as well. Sometimes on the defensive end, it's what you need, especially a team like Memphis, who they really kind of need that
They
grit.
can use a hard nosed player.
Exactly, because they do have so much skill and talent around. That's really where Winslow kind of gets to use those different skills on him. And then to his long range, I mean, 101st overall among small forwards with 22%, and he shot it 2.5 times too. He's got to at least pick good shots or pick shots he can make if he wants to be above this 25 position for a long standing time.
Yeah, well, I think that last year was his stats were really kind of a one off for him. I think he's shown in his career that he can shoot the ball. He can limit his turnovers. He's done these things, limit his fouls. He never actually gotten over three until last year. He was played injured in the 11 games he did play. It wasn't a great 11 games, and that team really shown that they didn't really have the fit for him at the time. Anyways, that they were how they played after he was injured. But with that being said, he's still a great player, like you said. He actually could be a much higher on this list He's very similar to a lot of people we have ranked between 15 and 20. I think that's where he belongs. But again, he just has to be healthy.
Yeah, and I mean what we've seen from him when he was healthy. I mean, looking at October, how he did was, which was probably the month that he obviously had no wear and tear. He might have been most healthy last October. He played obviously only in 4 games, not a huge amount to go off of, but he was a guy who was averaging 15 points and 8.5 rebounds, along with his 6 assists per game in those 4 games in October. So if he could put up anything along 14, 8, and 6, I mean, that's a guy.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's a guy who we're considering much higher than that 25 position, especially if he can put in at least 60 games this year. That would be awesome, especially again for a team like Memphis.
Heck, this position is not the strongest position in the league.
Yeah,
That he put the most on the numbers throughout the whole season. Playing every game, that guy can get him in the top 10.
absolutely. But maybe. I mean, that's a discussion that will
Close,
come for it. If he puts it up, we'll see how it is next year. But for now, Justin Winslow
potentially.
is in right at the start of our list, number 25.
That's exactly it. Well, right after Justice Winslow, we actually have a young player over in Atlanta. Pretty sure he's starting over Gallinari. That's why he is this high. We have Deandre Hunter. Solid young kid. He had a great rookie season last year.
Yeah, absolutely. A guy who was obviously picked high in the draft and went through one of those confusing scenarios where he's picked by the Lakers, traded to the Hawks, however it works out, but ultimately he's an Atlanta Hawk and he finds himself in a position where not only is he on a good team that's on the rise, but he's on a team where there's a lot of guys in that wing position, whether it's Cam Reddish, Bogdan now, like you said, Gallinari can play the wing, Kevin Herter. They just have a lot of options there, so he needs to stay at top of his game if he wants to keep getting starting minutes. And I think that alone is going to make his progression just keep going forward. I don't know how good DeAndre Hunter's ceiling is going to be, but I mean, like you said, after his rookie year, already finds himself at number 24. Sure, Hawks fans like they love Johns Collins. They probably have some opinions about Hunter as well that are pretty strong, and they might come at us harder saying that he deserves to be higher, and he'll have a chance to prove it. I think as long as he keeps out playing Cam Reddish, he's going to keep getting good minutes, and he just needs to, I guess, improve a bit on the offensive end, but overall, a super good two-way player.
Yeah, no, and as Atlanta gets better, as he gets better, Atlanta gets better. Atlanta becomes a playoff team. It's going to show the league his actual worth and where he could come a better player. He can get higher on this list. He can show us the media that Atlanta players are really good. Because you look at that team as a whole, and they have all these solid young pieces, but they had such a miserable year last year. It makes you wonder what they were doing.
It's
How bad were they playing together? But with that being said, they have so much talent
exact.
that if they even use just a little bit of the talent the potential that they have, like Hunter included, they can be a playoff team easily just with the pieces they have.
It's funny you say that though, because again, going back to Hunter, I mean, he did have one of the worst wins added among small forwards in the league. So, like you said, they obviously have the talent, but they need to put it together to wins. Because when you put up a decent stat line as a rookie, but you still find yourself at the bottom of a list like that, maybe there's something like you said that you are doing wrong that you need to switch up and not worry so much about just putting the numbers on the board, finding ways to actually contribute to getting that W. But that like we said too could just be part of being on a bad team overall. That could completely shift this year. But if this is a consistent trend for DeAndre Hunter, definitely a concern if he is always at the bottom of a list like that.
Oh, definitely. But still, like you say, at number 24, the fact that he made the top 25 after 1 year, still a pretty good rookie year. Hope he may. I can put him in there as a contender for a sophomore slump if other players around him start eating his minutes. If he does go through a rough stretch, couple bad games, but if he puts up anywhere close to this next year, then he should keep his spot in the top 25.
Yeah, and I mean, post All-Star break looked like a bit more aggressive of a player too. Rebounds went up from 4 to 7. So as long as he keeps getting down low, using his body good, even if he does have a bit of a slump offensively, they'll still find value for him. So I think he'll be okay.
They say he made the list, so that's
Exactly.
good.
Especially as a rookie.
It's difficult as a rookie.
Definitely.
Uh, we will have a couple more of those. Let's keep moving on. Right just after Hunter over at the 23 spot, someone who I actually had a couple spots higher. I know you think he deserves to be in the top 25, but the former Raptor, Terence Ross, All Star, he put up 52 points in Toronto. Maybe not an All Star, but great shooter, great overall player, does the little things. I think he's undervalued on the Orlando team, but 23rd to me seems low.
Yeah, I would agree with the undervalue. I mean, myself, I put him at 24. Like you said, you had him higher. I definitely think he deserves a spot in the top 25, as long as he's obviously playing the small forward position. Orlando, I don't know what's going on, where clearly Terrence Ross is, other than any Evan Fournier, the best scorer on that team, and yet they're starting guys like James Ennis over him consistently. Where, yeah, I get it. You're obviously, yeah, and you're obviously bringing him off the bench, getting that spark plug. But like,
Yes.
ultimately, I feel like if they want to be a winning team, they need to put Terrence Ross at the top of the small forward depth chart and just let him see what he could do as a starter. I mean, this is a guy who, when you give him the ball, like you said, in Toronto, we've seen he can clearly score at a pretty lights out pace.
Baller.
Yeah, he's a sniper from beyond the arc. We don't even need to go through his percentages. He's always above 38, often above 40. So again, we don't need to look at that. But even if we look at like certain months, like again, he hit March last year. Yeah, he only played in 5 games, but 23 points in those 5 games, and he could do that at any point. And that's why Terrence Ross, I think, really should deserve a chance to start in Orlando, so we can really see what he could do. Because even to this day, he's still super athletic, a great scorer, and it definitely provides some little, like you said, a lot of little things for them in terms of value as well.
Yeah, like I'm sure if you remember when the Raptors played them in the playoffs last year. That Ross goes hard pretty much every minute he's on the court. He's a very mobile player, and in those prime years, where after next year he's probably going to start declining, just because he does rely a lot on athleticism. Even though he like I said he is a great shooter overall, but he is still not a very athletic player. He'll be 29 years old next year. It's probably his prime year. Once he hits 30, he might not put up these kind of years. But again, like I said, if he does start, he'll be able to put up even higher stat line. He'll do very well. I think what Orlando's kind of scared of is a couple years ago, whenever he got hurt, he only played about 20 games. He only put up about 8 points, 12 points per game. Um, and that year he started. He has not started since. He played the last 2 years. He played most games both years, but he has not started. He's been playing that 6 man role. I think he feels comfortable in that 6 man role. But like you say, if he is able to get that starting opportunity, but not only get that starting opportunity, get that ball in his hands as a starter, then he'll be able to really show us that Orlando can be a better team if he's starting.
Yeah, and I mean, he maybe, like you said, doesn't even need to start, but if you even look at it post to pre All-Star break last year, they did give him about 3 more minutes in the post All-Star term, and he did have a lot more production just from those 3 minutes. He went up to 19 points per game, I think, from 14. He also hit 43% of his threes on like 8.5 attempts. So this is a guy who, again, like we said, when they're giving him extra minutes, when they're using him, he likes it. He likes having the ball in his hand. He's not a guy who's ever afraid to shoot, whether it was down in Toronto when there was other options or down here. He was a guy who's always consistently looked to in the last minute because we know he's not afraid to take a three. It's just who Terrence Ross is, and I don't think even then we should be too worried about him later in his career because he is such a good shooter that he'll probably always at least be a double digit around their points per game guy at the very minimum.
I really hope so because I still remember where I was the day that he put up those 51 points or 52 points. I was in first year university, and Buddy was watching it in the dorm in the common room, and literally came and knocked on my door. And he's like, "Terrence Ross is at 30." I'm like, "Wait, what? How did he get 30 points?" He's like, "Yeah, it's the whatever, the third quarter or whatever." And I'm like, "Holy shit, what? Let's go!"
Yeah, and I mean,
But he has a potential.
and what it reminds me of using that too for bringing in another Toronto reference is like remember that game that Brendan Morrow had for the Blue Jays where he was just striking out everyone left, right, and center. That's what
Oh,
it
Brandon
reminded me
Moore was an
of.
all-star.
Yeah, because to this day, to me, I love Brendan Morrow, and like you said, you were watching that game, and it adds an element. I'm sure people who saw Brandon Jennings put up 50 to this day, will still argue Brandon Jennings is an NBA caliber player. And you know what? He starts on most teams if you ask those people, I'm sure. So
Oh,
it definitely definitely
it goes to show my bias, maybe though.
that's what I mean. It definitely adds a little spark when you see a guy go off like that because you know what he could do on any given night. And that's the kind of guy Terrence Ross is. He could do anything on any given night, truly.
Yeah, and like I said, let's just hope that he gets that opportunity in Orlando. He to stay on this list because if he does drop down a little bit, it's very close to fall off of this list.
Yeah, but it really depends too, the guys who are coming up. I'll speak about them in a couple of positions, a couple of guys who missed, but we'll get into those guys for now, and we'll really see Terrence Ross, like we said, battle it out, and hopefully he can really just get some steady pace and keep himself at some consistent numbers, whether it's keeping it at 15 or maybe even bumping it up a bit to the post All-Star number of about 19 points per game, where if we see him do that, definitely going to be a consistent guy on this list.
And that's where he should be, right? Actually, funny, we actually had Terrence Ross tied with the next guy on top of this list, but he did lose our tiebreaker. What we used as the other tiebreaker at least. So the next guy on this list was actually again one of these young guys, much younger, up and comer. The fact that I did not have this guy above Terrence Ross, but clearly you did, and you had him much higher than I had either one of these guys. That's why he made it the higher position. But we have Miles Bridges, the older brother, or no, are they twins? They're
I
twins.
I believe they are twins. I don't know which one is
Yeah,
older. I mean, yeah, the
the
easiest,
better brother.
the better brother. He's the Marcus of the Morrises. If we're gonna go into stats, neither of them are bad. I mean, both.
No, they're both had great years, and they're great young players coming up, and they have a great future ahead of them for sure.
Yeah, and for me and Miles Bridges, the big reason I had him so high was obviously last year. Sure, people may argue his stats were a bit inflated and they might go down because Gordon Hayward's there, but he's a guy who I feel like no matter what, he's gonna find his minutes and they're gonna find a way to piece him in where he's just gonna find a way to do the things he needs to still be a valuable player to them. I mean, between year 1 and 2, this is a guy who went, I believe, from just over 7.5 points to 13.5 points last year about. Improved his rebounding as well, improved basically everywhere. And improving 6 points from year to year where you're an under 10 point per game guy, that's a big jump. And from doing that to year one to two, that's actually really impressive to me. So at this point, I feel like Miles Bridges is going to keep improving based on what I've seen, and that's why I had him so high on my list personally.
See, I didn't have him. It's not that I didn't have him on my list. I still had him fairly high. He still was above the 25. I think I had him at about 23rd or 24th. But to me, it was like you said, he's gonna lose minutes to Gordon Hayward. He's not gonna play as many minutes next year. But to me, that's a good thing. He'll be able to get a little more efficient. He'll be able to be on a more winning team. Be able to play that role player and learn his role. To me, this is similar to OG Anunoby a couple years ago in Toronto when they picked up Kawhi. I know, don't anyone tell me that Gordon Hayward is Kawhi or anything like that. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that he was in the starting role over in Charlotte. That except for OG was on a good team. Bridges is not a not so good team, but he's going to lose the starting role to Hayward. He's probably not going to play very much. He might have a down year this year. He'll be better for it because he'll be able to learn from a player. The team will be better for it. He'll be playing on more of a winning team at this point, and he'll be better for it in the year after. But I just don't see him having a much better year next year than he did this year. I see him kind of capping out for right now and then potentially getting higher after that.
I mean, it's definitely possible. He's a guy who, again, it's glimpses of what you could see. Like he had February, March, he had, I believe it was 18 per game and 6.5 rebounds in 11 games. And that's like, if he could be an 18-6 guy consistently, then definitely Miles Bridges would be a guy who's always on this list. Both Bridges brothers alike are great on
Yeah.
defense. I mean, Bridges, he was a bit lower in the steals category, whereas I believe Mikal was pretty much in the top three among small forwards. But Miles is actually second on this entire list that we have in blocks among small forwards. Again, that's a guy only in his second year as well, playing with guys like LeBron, Kawhi, Jimmy Butler, and again, he still finished second in blocks. So defensively, they don't really need to improve much. They're already solid ass players, and offensively, I think they're only going to keep getting better, honestly. So to me, I think Miles Bridges is probably going to be a top 15 small forward at some point. I had him pretty high this year. It's just a matter of it really depends how much Hayward replaces him and if they're able to integrate him. So we'll see how that goes.
It's definitely going to be an interesting team over in Charlotte though this year.
Absolutely. It's a lot of good teams on the rise, and we'll definitely speak about it in our season preview that's going to come soon. But for now, Miles Bridges definitely deserves a spot in our list. I still
At
think
number
he's
22.
higher, but there he is, number 22.
That's all he gets today. Well, just on top of Miles Bridges at 22. Over at number 21, we have someone who, again, I thought would get higher on the list, Otto Porter Jr.
Yeah, I mean, Otto Porter Jr. is a guy to me in Washington. I liked him a lot, and then I feel like he got the chance in Chicago, and almost like we talked about Draymond Green previously. Sorry, Draymond is for anyone who feels like I said Draymond too much there, but I feel like Otto Porter kind of just threw the opportunity away, where he got the big contract, and he hasn't really stepped up to be anything. He's just continued to be that 13 and a half guy who's the third good scoring option, but he just hasn't been anything like he's a good player. He hasn't been great though.
Well, to me, he had a down year last year, but he was also hurt. He didn't play that much. Um, he actually, the year right before that, when he's his first year over uh, in Chicago, he actually had a great year. He put up 17 and a half points per game. He had 17 and 5 or 17 and 4. He had a very good year.
That
And
was
that's kind of where I see him as.
that was only in 15 games though after he was traded there. That was when Washington gave up on him, and he had that edge of I need to go
He
out there.
was trying.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And then he got the contract in last year between the injuries and between the games he played, where again he played 14 games last year. He played 15 in that 7.5. It's about the same. They gave him a lot less minutes last year, and I just feel like
Barely played.
whether it was load management or what it was, I just feel like they know who the true Otto Porter is. They know they have better options on Chicago, and he's just, like I said, a good player, but he's never even going to be their number two. He's going to be either three or four. And
That's where he belongs, though. That's what he got. That's how he got paid. He
yeah,
didn't get paid as a top player.
he got paid. He got paid substantially based on that 17 and a half he was getting.
To me, he got paid similar to someone like a Will Barton or Harrison Barnes.
Yeah, maybe, but I
Where
feel
he
like
belongs,
but both those players are much higher in our list because I feel like they do a lot
much
more
higher.
than Otto Porter.
I, I I think he just gets a bad rap for how much because of his contract.
Yeah,
His contract really throws him down the drain because I think to me he's a 14 to 15 point per game guy this year. He's going to be one of the vets in that team. I think he actually probably should have got one or two spots higher, not much higher. But I definitely think he's an above average small forward.
yeah, like I said, he's a good player. He's just not a great player. That's why I think this spot's pretty good for him because I don't think no matter what he's going to move much. He's going to probably, like I said, like we both said, 14, maybe 15 kind of points thing, and it just doesn't move him much. And I feel like the thing with Otto Porter is, like I said, when he plays with a chip, when he has something to prove, he kind of gives you that illusion that he's a much better player, and that's what a lot of people bought into for that short period because we know he could be it, but he hasn't shown that he could be it for 82 games, and until he does, he won't move up. He might not move down, but he won't move up.
If he plays 30 minutes next year instead of 23, he'll easily get his points up to 16 points per game. And I think he'll move up one or two, but we'll watch. We'll see.
Yeah,
Otto, I'm rooting for you.
but I mean, even as a starter, he was worse than he was off the bench last year too. He only had 12 points as a starter per game last year. Just wasn't good.
He started 9 games.
Yeah,
Started 9 games.
but
Another
still,
season.
still though.
Let's see him do it for a season. That's all I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah. But do you think he'll move up at all, or do you think he'll stay around the spot?
I think he probably goes up to about 19th,
It's possible.
19th maybe 18th,
It's possible.
depending on how he plays. If anything, if Chicago turns into a winning team this year, he takes on a leading role, and he's one of the main parts of them winning games, then he can even go higher. But we'll see. But either way, right after Otto Porter Jr., enough to me talking about him. I fight for all my guys. Don't worry.
Tough Canadian.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You got me.
Before we move on from there, I guess because we went through the first few, let's talk about a couple guys who I guess missed the list because we know that they wouldn't get seen any higher than this, and we don't want to, I guess, give any false hope for anyone who's fans of them. So I mean, I guess between 28 to 26, I believe I want to say 28, we had Mikal Bridges, who we already kind of
Yep,
touched about. Guy
brother.
defensively awesome. He was near the top in steals, near the top in blocks among small forwards. Just he was eighth among wins added actually for Phoenix among all small forwards. So a guy who does a lot of good things just needs to improve offensively a bit. And we don't even know who's going to play for Phoenix as small forward either. Like it might be Cam Johnson because Cam Johnson's huge. They like Cam Johnson a lot. They picked him recently, but they also picked Burgess only 2 years ago with the top 10 pick, if I'm not mistaken. So it's just who gets more minutes. So that's where it's hard for me not to put Burgess in the top 25 because I don't know
At
how
least
he's
he,
going to play.
at least he's going to be on a winning team potentially. He's going to be there with Chris Paul. He's going to be getting set up. I know that he was getting set up before. Rubio wasn't a bad player, but I think he's going to be in a good spot for sure.
Yeah, already 1.4 steals last year though as a sophomore. That's awesome, especially again on a guy on an up and coming team. It's just I'm super impressed with both Bridges brothers. Their vision on defense and actually for guys who are so young, it's great.
But still not good enough to cut our list.
No, 27, I
Which
believe. Who did we have at 27?
uh, well, see, 27 we actually had Michael Bridges or Mikael Bridges. Sorry,
Sorry.
28 we had Josh Hart.
Yeah, so Josh Hart, another guy, a lot of good potential, solid power
But
forward, just doesn't do enough yet to crack the top 25.
he, he's got to, yeah, like you say, he just got to contribute a little more, do a little more on offense, do a little more on defense. He'll make it there someday. But I look at this list and I go, wow, we just did the power forward in the center list, and people that missed are people like, um, what did we have? We had Marcus Morris. We had both Morris brothers missed our power forward list, which was substantially better than a lot of these players. We had DeAndre Jordan, Marcus All missed the other list on the center list. I'm looking at these guys and I'm going, well, like here at number 26, great guy, great player, great defensive player, at Dorian Finney Senior. I just I don't think he's a top 25 player at any position.
For me, it's one of those situations where I had him in the top 25, and he's a guy who he just does a bit of everything, and he's proven to do it year after year. And again, he just doesn't do much wrong. I mean, yeah, sure, he was 38th in points among small forwards, but when on a team like Dallas, when you have Luka, when you have Porzingis, when you have Tim Hardaway, when you have all these guys.
He's a great role player. He's a great guy to have off your bench or a great guy to start to provide that defensive edge
Yeah,
when you have the starters that are going to put up the points anyways.
yeah, but again, he's just as a role player, I agree, but he does all these role things so good where it's like obviously he doesn't have the passing ability of Draymond Green, but aside from that, defensively, rebounding, I mean, he was first in offensive rebounding among small forwards, and he hardly played in 30 minutes per game last year. He was the only player with more than two offensive rebounds per game. He was 11th in real plus minus. He was sixth in wins added. So the things that Dorian Finney-Smith does have a huge contribution to the Dallas Mavericks, and
The little things, right?
yeah, and he's so underrated. Even when he does need to score a bit more, there's been a couple periods where for months, whether just for a month period or post All-Star break, he could put up over 10 points per game, and he shoots the three at like a 40% rate. So it's not a guy who can't put the ball in the net. It's just a guy who knows how to play the system so well that he doesn't need to put up these stats to have a huge value to Dallas. And that's why I really think he deserved a spot in the top 25.
Yeah, I guess I had him too low for you. I still had him in my top 30. I would take him off the bench on my team any day of the week.
I'd say the
I
other
just
guy who might deserve a shout out is Rodney Hood for his 49.3% three-point percentage last year on 3.4 attempts. No, he didn't play the full year either, but almost 50% from three on 3.5 attempts. I mean, that's pretty awesome.
if he would have played the full year, he would have cracked the top 25 for sure.
If he put up, oh my God, if for a full year, if you could shoot 50% from three, I don't even know if that's been done.
And he's a good defensive player. He does all the little things as well. He would be someone who would be right up there in the 22nd, 23rd spot if he played a full year.
Yeah,
Got hurt a lot by that.
but even then, like we've seen who he was in Cleveland, and like that player wasn't that great.
It wasn't that great.
But the guy we saw in Utah before that was a very good player too. So
And the player we're seeing in Portland right now is a very good player as well.
exactly.
But again, they still not good enough to make our list.
No, no.
Crack the top 30, but this wasn't a top 30. This is a top 25. So going back to the list, talking about done talking about the people that aren't good enough. Let's talk about the people that are good enough. So we were just talking about Otto Porter Jr. over at 21. Here, just on top of Otto Porter Jr. at number 20, finally in the top 20. Probably deserved to be higher considering, again, talking about three-point shooting that we were talking about earlier. But we have Joe Harris. He's a perfect player for that system in Brooklyn. They keep talking about trading for someone. He's the perfect guy. Don't trade him. He'll hit every three-pointer. He's going to be wide open.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy, Percy, who I had a lot higher on my list. When you saw my list, you were like, whoa, you have Joe Harris high. And to me, it's just the consistency factor where, like, like you said, you're going to put Joe Harris out there. He's going to hit, like, one out of every two shots he takes at minimum. And he's going to get 15 points for you. He's going to play pretty much every game. Pretty good on the defensive end for a guy who doesn't look like he'd be that good on the defensive end. So yeah, like there's not a lot bad that I feel like could be said about Joe Harris. And then, like I said, he's a guy who we know is going to put up 15. And there's not a lot of guys at small forward who are actually putting up who are putting up that number consistently when we look through the list. So that's why I personally had him higher.
See, I had him right around that 20 spot. I think I had him 21st, or maybe 22nd. But for me, it was the fact that because of, I know Irving did play last year, but he didn't play the full year. And they're bringing in Durant, and they might bring in a third star. They might ship out Dinwiddie and LeVert for another third star. This is without me even talking about LeVert. Jared Allen up and coming, getting more and more touches per game. I just think his touches are going to go down. I think he's going to hit with great efficiency. I think he's going to put up a Kyle Korver type of year where he hits that 45%, and we're like, wow. And that's pretty much what he's been doing the last couple of years. He's been doing amazing, but I just don't think he's going to be able to take as many shots. He's not going to get as many minutes in the court. If he does, the ball's just not going to meet his hands as much as it was last year. That Brooklyn team last year, whenever Kyrie Irving was not playing, and the year before that, they're a team that's built on ball movement, passing, getting around, and this ISO ball that Irving and Durant are going to play. It's going to allow Harris to have his most efficient year ever, but his stats are going to go down overall.
It's possible, but I don't think he would dip much lower than like 12. And even then, like if he's hitting at his
Like 11.
yeah, like and even then, if he's hitting at his post All-Star break numbers, like I believe he was 47% post All-Star break in just under 20 games. Like if he's hitting at 47%, I mean that's a guy.
He had 47% on 5 attempts 2 years ago in
Yeah,
76 games.
yeah. So he could clearly do that consistently, and if he could do that again, I mean, what more can you ask from a guy? That's a guy who, like you said, like Kyle Korver. Kyle Korver was an All-Star one year. And not saying he necessarily deserved it, because I believe that was a game in Atlanta where just Atlanta players made it left, right, and center. But yeah, but clearly he has the potential to be a guy who other teams look at and they're like, oh man, I wish I had a Joe Harris. Maybe there's teams that do it right now, but he's a great shooter, and I feel like he's still going to find a way to get open. And I feel like we're not even considering that Kyrie, even on a good year, rarely plays more than 50 games. And I even then too, like yeah, you play ISO. If your ISO fails, you still kick the ball right. So I feel like
Yeah, and that's why he's going to get these wide open shots.
yeah. So I feel like if anything, a guy like Harris LeVert is probably going to suffer more opposed to Joe Harris.
I just don't think Harris LeVert's going to be there. I think they're going to bring in somebody else.
We'll see.
Talking about that Hawks team real quick. The only starter on that team who didn't get an All-Star nod was Damari Carroll. And the sad part is he was actually close.
Yeah, and I mean he got a big contract at the end of that year probably too because
Oh yeah, he did. I was the year he got the contract.
he was a born
Junkyard Dog
so,
version 2.0.
uh,
But yeah, no, I think Joe Harris, he's definitely a very deserving player, and he's going to fit that system very well. I really hope they don't trade him for Brooklyn's sake. For Joe Harris's sake, he'd probably be considered more of a star somewhere else. I see him very, very a similar mold to Klay Thompson if he'd be able to get those more touches per game.
and
and
improve his
improve and
defense.
improve defense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because I mean he was
yeah.
63rd and on a 63rd
He's
amongst
got to get better
the
defense, and
steals. Yeah,
that's another reason why he wasn't high for me. It
yeah,
wasn't as high for me because
yeah.
people that I put just higher than him are people like Otto Porter Jr., who is just a little bit lower on this list, but to me has that higher defensive capability. Joe Harris hasn't proved that to me yet, which is funny because he's been in the league actually even longer. He's not young anymore, more Joe Harris. So, but he does what he does very, very well. So I really hope they keep him on that team though.
Yeah, like it's a guy who's never averaged more than point 0.6 steals per game in his entire career, so definitely needs to improve in that regard. But I forgot how long he was in the league too, where when we were doing this list and I looked at him and I saw he was on Cleveland, I remembered back to his 2K picture on Cleveland and his super low rating, and I was like, oh my God, I remember that.
That guy, the guy who gets 2 points a game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and now like he has a beard, looks like grown up. Then he had like no like super just like college looking, like just bum Joe Harris, like not
The
bum, but
guy, the guy that you include in the first trade right away because you don't want this guy on your team anymore.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
he's just a waste, not going to get minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy.
Rather trade him
But
for
he turned into a great player. He's been putting up. Actually, 2 years ago, he was a top 3 point shooter in the whole league,
yeah.
number one, and he did it on six attempts per game,
Yeah.
almost.
Oh, and
So
like you
that's
said, in
pretty good.
75 games, 76 games too. Not like he
Yeah,
played 60
that
or
wasn't
50.
wasn't a slump, but he wasn't hurt, right? That he is one of the best shooters in the league. He does what he does very, very well. His catch and shoot is amazing.
Yep.
If he improves a couple little things, he can definitely go much, much higher on this list. But
Hmm.
until he improves those other things and we learn that he's a good fit in that Brooklyn system, that he's still going to get his touches, until then, it's a good spot for
Absolutely, I agree. Other than the fact that I had him like 5 spots higher, but you know.
him. Yeah, it didn't work out though. Uh, but right, so right on top of Joe Harris, we have another Joe.
Oh,
And this Joe is in this list not for the same reason as Joe Harris. He does the opposite. He
okay.
shoots the ball. He shoots the ball very well.
Yeah.
He's just not aggressive. We have Joe Ingles, another Joe, but he's just a very good defensive player. He can pass the ball. He's one of the best playmakers in the position. He does all the little things right. And that's why a guy who is probably the lowest points per game in our full top 25 is able to make this list and still make it in the top 20.
Yeah, and I mean, you hit it on the nail exactly where it's a guy who kind of just does a bit of everything. Like he just sacrifices whatever for the team. If Joe Ingles wanted, I'm sure he could have stats more similar to Joe Harris, where because he is a really good shooter. But
He is.
he's always like we said, he finds a way to allow Donovan, for Rudy, for Conley to strive and just do the things to allow him to contribute to the offense, and just get them the wins at the end of the day. I mean, there's a reason that when they had Gordon Hayward, they were comfortable getting rid of him. Even though they knew they had a new scorer with Donovan, they also knew they had a small forward for the long term with Joe Ingles. So that says a lot about who he is, not just what we see, but what Utah sees in him as well.
I think he's going to keep thriving in that system. I think he plays that system very well. Utah's building something very great there. All those guys are getting a little bit older. Ingles is actually 33 because he actually started in the league when he's a little bit older at this point. So he is getting a little bit older, but his experience shows in the way he plays. He has very, very high IQ on the court, which is going to allow him to keep playing as he gets older. He doesn't rely on athleticism because he like someone like Marcus Gasol who just gets in the right spots at the right times. He can move the ball well. Um, I don't I can't foresee him getting much higher on this list unless he does get those points per game up. But at this point in his career, he is what he is. He does what he does very well. I think he might get up to like 11 or 12, like what he's done in the past. But he'll keep doing those little things, and Utah will keep being a contender.
Yeah, I mean, like even overall, the guy was 30th in assists with 5.2. That's among the whole NBA. So, I mean, the fact that he clearly finished above assist in at least one team starting point guard shows how good of a passer this guy is. He's able, like you said, facilitate the offense, has a clear spot in Utah. I agree. Like,
That was a down year compared to the year before in assists.
exactly. And I mean, I agree he likely won't get much higher, probably won't get much lower for a couple years either, though. I think
No.
I had him in a similar spot, maybe a couple positions lower, but he'll probably still be between 18 to 22, 23 at the very worst for the next few years. And again, it's a guy who little spurts, he has amazing little runs. He shot 47% likewise from three during the month of March, and I think post All-Star break he was 43 or 41% as well. So
Oh, he's a career 40% 3-point shooter.
yeah, so when he, like you said, when he gets the ball, he can do it well, just not as aggressive, but he doesn't need to be because there's so many other good scorers in that team, and he finds a way to let them do their thing.
We say that, but he's still averaged over 5.5 3 pointers attempted per game over the last 3 years. He
Yeah.
still shoots the ball,
Oh,
but he doesn't shoot 2 pointers. He doesn't shoot stupid shots. He doesn't shoot the mid range. He just does the right thing.
and the durability too. I mean, thinking about it, games played 79, 81, 82, 82, 82, 72. Like,
He plays.
yeah, this is a guy who's missed what, 3 games in his entire career when you think about it? Like, that's insane. So yeah, Joe Ingles definitely deserving of a spot on our list.
Especially as a player who's getting older. Like he'll be 34 next year. He's not a young guy. He's got or 33 next year. These guys are people that are typically as you're getting into your 30s when you slow down. Everyone thinks that Kyle Lowry is going to drop into the top 10 of point guards just because he's 33, 34. But Ingles is really bucking the trend in that case.
He's one of these guys, I feel like, I know we don't know him personally, and I'm sure there's people who maybe know a bit more.
Cool shit.
And not only that, I feel like he's super smart. Like there's probably something super weird, like just off the court too. Like I'm sure he's a nerd in some type of just like crazy, either like engineer, just weird super thing that just makes him super smart too. Just seems like that kind of guy. Like you said, 33, got into the NBA late, so I'm sure he had like a real career somewhere outside that he was doing pretty well too. To be able to still play ball at a professional level that's not crazy high, and then actually have a way to get into the NBA too.
He's Australian.
Yeah. Interesting. So
Uh,
there you go, probably
uh,
playing in the ABA for a while, or wherever that.
likely. The Australian Basketball Association.
There we go.
But no, Joe Ingles definitely makes the list, definitely worthy of it, and I think he'll stay in the top 20 for the rest of the year. Right after Joe Ingles, we go to a much younger route. A young player who definitely hasn't proven to be a top 20 small forward. Heck, he's not even the best small forward on his team. Michael Porter Jr.
Yeah, I mean Michael Porter Jr. clearly a guy that I had much higher than you on my list. I actually had him above his counterpart Will Barton, who we have not seen yet. Um, I'm sure a lot of people might disagree with that, who have seen Denver play over a number of years based on the consistency of Will Barton. But I mean, Michael Porter Jr., I mean, it's a guy who, when he played last year, I guess when like last year, obviously he finally got healthy, started to play, hasn't had many injuries since. But when he's on the court, he's a difference maker. And as good as Will Barton is, I can't really say the same. He's just a good role filler player. And like I said, MPJ is a true difference maker.
Yeah, and he was someone who was very, very highly touted coming out of high school. Essentially, he
Yeah.
was event out before he got hurt. He was considered to be the number one overall pick for a little while,
Yeah, then he fell to 15, I believe.
which was mainly because he got hurt and he missed the whole first year.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of people didn't have faith in him. He had faith in himself.
Hmm.
My issue with him is that we don't know if he's going to be able to play the full year right now. As much as he did play over 60 games or over 50 games last year plus playoffs, he didn't play that much. His numbers were okay, but he didn't play as starting number minutes. He wasn't a starting player. I just see that team keep going with Barton and with Millsap at power forward. The future of this team, though, is Michael Porter Jr. Moving up the power forward, Millsap probably coming off the bench. I think that would really unlock him, and that would really skyrocket him up the power forward list. But I think when we're considering small forwards, I think the people that are ahead of him um, just have a bigger body of work to be able to go back on and are a little more proven at this point. Not that Porter Jr. is a bad player. I see him as a key player of Denver. He's just not going to be a top 3 or top 4 player on that team for the next couple of years just because they don't need him.
Yeah, I mean, I would completely disagree, to be honest. I mean, to begin, like, yeah, I agree that he's going to end up being power forward. We had this discussion a bit ourselves.
He'll be a great power forward.
Yeah, I mean he's 6'10". I mean, why would he play power forward, right? But ultimately, what it comes down to for me is he did play some starting minutes. We seen him play eight. We seen him start eight games last year when Barton went down. He started all those games at small forward, if I'm not mistaken. In those games, I mean, he played 32.4 minutes per game. His stat line during that, 21 and a half and 8.5 rebounds. So I mean, this is a guy when he starts, when he has, yeah, sure, it's 8 games, but guess what? We also touted guys like Nurkic last year, super high, who only played in 7, and someone else earlier, who I sorry for not remembering his name, who only played 15 games, I believe, last year. So clearly, it is a small body of work.
Winslow.
Yes, sorry, Justice Winslow. But again, when Michael Porter Jr. did start last year in those 8 games, he was one of the best people on this list. You can't deny that 22, essentially an 8.5, would not get anyone on this
Yeah,
list a top 10 spot.
eight games. Anyone can have an 8 game stretch. Christian Wood had a great 8 game stretch.
Yeah, we put him 15th on another list, and it wasn't even an.
Well, for Wood, it was a little more than an 8 game stretch, but Porter Jr. for me, like he just didn't show it in the playoffs. That team went far in the playoffs, and he had a time to showcase his abilities. He played more minutes, and he didn't get more points. He ended up with 11 points per game, and on 8 more minutes per game. He wasn't more efficient. He wasn't more effective. His boards are up there, but he hasn't proven to be the star player yet. I'm not saying he's bad. I had him in my top 20. I didn't have him any lower than my top 20. I think he's going to be a better power forward than he will be a small forward. I, I just to put a lot of people ahead of him just based on their career body of work being able to play those minutes. He just hasn't proven to me being able to play the minutes, even in the playoff time where I would have figured he would actually end up starting at one point. He didn't.
Yeah, but I mean, that was a team who played completely different in the playoffs than they did the regular season, where they got mainly fully healthy going into the playoffs, and they were able to ride just Murray and Yocic versus having to rely on other guys. The thing with Porter Jr. when he started is that team was a bit down in terms of who was starting. Obviously, he was fully replacing Will Barton on that team at the time. And with that being said, too, like you could say whatever you want about his playoff stats, but that's his first playoff run. Still at 11 points per game. If we look at Will Barton has never had more than 10 points per game in any of his playoff runs. So that's not a guy that we could chirp in terms of his production when his first playoff run was already better than someone who you're saying is much better than him. So,
I didn't say much better. I had one spot ahead of him.
hey, but still, you're saying he's better.
I am saying he's better. I overall I'm saying he's a better player. Yes, I think Will Barton has proven to be a better player in this league.
I mean, overall, you can't deny that a guy who's had 6 or 7 years of about 12 or 15 points per game, hits at about a 35% rate, isn't a better.
Plays good defense.
Yeah, you can't argue that. But I mean, in terms of what they could do, and again, what we've seen in Porter starting 8 games last year, what if he starts 40 this year and he puts up that 21 and 8 mark? Yeah, that's obviously going to justify him a better spot than Will Barton. And that's what I'm assuming is obviously going to happen this year.
So, but if you're saying that he got 8 games where he played 32 minutes on, and he played 55 games overall. So in those other games where he came off the bench, he was only worthy of about 10 minutes per game. That's all he was worthy of on that team.
The big difference was the post and pre All-Star game numbers. Obviously, like because he was coming back from the injury, they don't want to fiddle him in, and because Will Barton was fully healthy at that time, there's a lot of minutes that are taken away from him. Pre All-Star game, he only played 15 minutes per game. There was 40 games before pre All-Star, only had 6.5 points. That drops his numbers a lot. He plays in 15 games post All-Star break, 21 minutes and a half, goes up to 13 a game. So he doubled his production with 8 more minutes. So
Like I say, I have to see it. I'd have to see him actually do it for a season before I can even consider him any higher than this.
yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. I agree. It's funny how we're saying this because the person we have right on top of Michael Porter Jr. is someone who hasn't even played yet. We have Anthony Edwards.
So tell me, how do we prove it then? But
It's fucking hard, eh? Hell, he barely even played in college last year, and now he's gonna go play in the big leagues against all the big boys.
yeah, I mean, the key thing like that did it for me was originally he's a guy who I even wondered if I should put in the top 25 because there is so little, I guess, high level footage of him. But at the end of the day, the NBA scouts know what they're doing. They know who they're picking. They know for the most part, even if he might not be an all-star coming out his first year, this is a guy who's probably going to be as at least NBA ready and who's going to produce. And he's going to have a chance to play in Minnesota if as long as he's the starting small forward. I wouldn't be surprised if he puts up like a 15 and 4, 15 and 5 in terms of rebounds, a couple assists stat line, and yeah, then pretty much you're justified with this ranking right here because his numbers are similar to a guy like Will Barton, and I'm confident that Anthony Edwards could play defense as well.
Yeah, no, I think I'll keep up on defense for sure. I think he might get burned by the higher end small forwards if he does have to go against them. I don't think he'll have to go against them. I think they'll shuffle the lineup so he's not ever really lining up against LeBron James very much in his rookie year. With that being said, I do think he's going to get the ball a lot, just based on I know that historically number one overall picks have been at least given that opportunity to thrive. I know that Russell and Karl Anthony Towns are both players that take a lot of shots. They're both players that can get over 20 points per game. Heck, combined, they're probably going to combine for about 44, between 44 and 48 next year. So they're going to be very, very good, those two players. But there's still going to be other points to go around. I actually think that Edwards is going to go up. You said about 15 points per game. I could see him about 18 points per game, 17 to 18. Rubio's going to be able to pass that ball quite a bit. He's not going to take a lot of shots. He's going to get probably the best assist numbers of his career just playing with all these shooters. Just with that being said, I do think that Edwards, because he is a former number one overall pick, they went with him for a reason. They really do believe in him. They're going to give him the opportunity. And even if he puts up 15 points, he's still justified to be in the top 25, but his potential is to be so much higher. That's why he was able to get that number one overall pick. I know it's a weak draft, but he's still the number one overall pick.
Yo, absolutely. I think his potential overall will be much higher. I just think, like overall, like I feel like we tend to maybe over assume what rookies are going to do. I think the realistic thing is, like I said, he'll find a way. He might struggle at first to find a way to score, but he'll end up coming around. And I think maybe post All-Star numbers, it might be similar to like an 18 per game. But I do think at the start he will struggle a bit because he doesn't hit the three that well. He is a guy who really needs to cut to the basket to find a way to score. And I do find it, yeah, and I think it'll take him a bit to find kind of the speed, adjust to that kind of the difference at the NBA level. And then once he figures it out, I think we'll see a much better version of him. But overall, I think around the 17 spot is pretty good for him because, like you said, he'll get the ball, get a chance to play, probably prove himself. He just won't have he won't have the best rookie year we've ever seen. He won't be a top 10.
He's not going to be a Blake Griffin 22 and 12 or 24 and 12.
Exactly. I would be very, very surprised. Yes.
But he's a very good contender for the Rookie of the Year award if he can get up to those 18 points per game.
Yeah.
He can get up to like those John Morant numbers. That would be fantastic.
I would say if I had to pick anyone, I would pick right now, I would pick him for Rookie of the Year, my number two pick. The only guy I would even say close, yeah, someone could say LaMelo, it's possible. But I would say if anyone in Boston goes down and Aaron Naismith comes in, because Boston isn't that deep this year, I think Naismith has a chance to be Rookie of the Year, but that's the only other guy I think even has a chance, honestly.
I think that Edwards wins it. But yeah, you're right. Because Boston's not deep. But overall, I do think that Edwards is going to be given the opportunity from day one.
Absolutely.
Probably going to be one of the only players from that class that's starting outside of maybe Wiseman and Golden State. But let's be honest, he's not going to put up more than 10 points.
But yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so that's not a bad spot for Anthony Edwards. The potential is why he's at number 17. We'll see if he goes up. But let's see from here.
And last pick before we end our first segment of this, number 16.
Perfect. Here we go. Okay. So, if you guys didn't see this, 2 videos ago, we were talking about this player in the Michael Porter Jr. Segment. You know, the player that starts over Michael Porter Jr., plays twice as many minutes as Michael Porter Jr., is more productive than Michael Porter Jr.
Anything else?
I got shot on for putting Will Barton ahead of Michael Porter Jr. Can someone out there just be on my side and say Will Barton's a better player? Because I think we're about to talk about how Will Barton's not, and I think I'm right. So
Well, I mean, for the sake of Will Barton and the sake it is his segment, I'm not going to say much bad about him. I mean, anyone who wants to see why Michael Porter Jr. in my mind is the better of the two options,
go
this
back and watch it.
go back and watch definitely. Will Barton, I mean, it's not like this guy's a bad player, right? Like I said in the last video too, it's been what, 6, 7 years that this guy has been a 12 to 15 point per game guy. I don't think there's been a year, maybe one, that he's been under 35% from three. Great on defense, hits the mid-range shot like not many other guys I would say do nowadays. He doesn't do a lot of things wrong either. To me, it's just really like when they've needed to rely on Will Barton for anything, they feel like they can and they can't, and that's where he kind of lapses for me. And like I said too, this is a guy who's never averaged more than 10 points per game in the playoffs. But other than those two things, like Will Barton, like I said, he's a good player overall, and it's not a bad rating for him by any means.
So Will Barton's never averaged 10 points more per game in the playoff because he's only played in 2 playoff series, and he's only started 3 games in the playoffs.
Yeah, but I mean, the other guy we compared him to had we could say the same things about it. So at the end of the day, like 2 series is still he could have done more than 9 points per game between those 2 series. Like one of them
Listen,
was
no,
2 years ago. It's not like they were both at the beginning of his career, but
no, he was an experienced player during both these things.
exactly.
I think that he shows up. I think that he's just he hasn't been given the chance to prove it. I think we can probably say the same thing about Michael Porter Jr. But for me, it goes on to the little things that Barton does. He moves the ball well. He is a great ball handler. He doesn't hold on to the ball like a lot of people do. He really gets it out to the open guy. He rebounds well. He defends well. Does get the 15 points per game, and he's going to stay around that 15 points per game level. Porter Jr. is not coming in and taking his spot. If anything, Porter Jr. will become a starter, yes, by taking Millsap's spot and playing up. But he's not coming in and taking Barton's spot. Barton's a very good, very solid, above average starting small forward in this league. He's not your star player. He doesn't need to be your star player. He needs to be your number 4 player. And that's what he does very well. For me, I think this is a great spot for him. I think I had him maybe 1 or 2 spots more higher, but I think at number 16 is really good for him. I think that he's a more borderline top 15 player, and he has been at his position for the last 4 or 5 years. Barton just another one of those guys who does the things very well. He doesn't move the ball as well as someone as Ingles, but he's able to still score the ball a little more aggressively. He does get those decent points per game numbers. Again, to me, at this point in their career, maybe Porter Jr. proves me wrong and laughs at me by the end of the season, and we do this at the end of the season, and it's completely wrong, and Barton loses his spot. If he loses his starting spot, he's probably not even going to make the top 20. But I think he keeps it. I don't think Porter Jr. takes it from him. I think Porter Jr. is going to have a great year, but I think Barton's going to have the same year as he has had for the last 6 or 7.
Yeah, what it really, I mean, before I guess to say anything, I mean, like you said, yeah, the guy clearly does all the little things. I mean, 10th in assists among small forwards, clearly has a good ability to pass the ball, 6.3 rebounds, very good at rebounding for a small forward, and 9th in real plus minus among small forward, top 10 in wins added among small forward. So clearly a guy who adds a lot of value to the Nuggets, absolutely. But like I said, at the same time, for not having him as high, he has had opportunities in Denver to show that he is the guy. A couple years ago, before they drafted Jamal Murray, a lot of people forget Denver didn't have anyone. They relied a lot on Will Barton to score, and he didn't do that any better than he has been now. Same thing, I believe, the year that they drafted Jamal Murray. They relied on Will Barton a lot, and he didn't really do anything special. He kept it around the same limit, and that's what they know he is. For Barton, it's not necessarily a matter of being replaced based on production of a starter. It's more so actually being there as well. I mean, like, yeah, last year there was the shortened season. There was 58 games, but there was still, I believe that's 14 missed, if I'm not mistaken. 14 games, like I said, for Michael Porter Jr., that's enough for him to show the coaches that you might be able to to ride that hot hand, and that's maybe where he gets replaced. The year before that, only plays in 43 games. So who knows? Maybe Will Barton's at a point where his body's breaking down a bit too. He still put up the production, but the longevity of an NBA season, he can't really keep up with it anymore. So that's where I struggle a bit more with Will Barton. But overall, as a player, I mean, yeah, he's a guy who everywhere, no matter what, Will Barton could do something for you.
To me, he's so similar to players like a Harrison Barnes. Just does things right. Not going to be that star player. He'll probably get paid like he is an above average player, but it's still. I think this is a good spot for him. I think number 16 is a great spot for him, and he'll still continue to be this kind of player. If he does regress, so be it. He does do the little things well. He'll have a place in the NBA at the very least. But I do see him continuing on around this range by the end of the year.
It's definitely possible. Like, absolutely not saying it's not. I think, if anything, like if someone told me that Will Barton's a better player than Harrison Barnes and we're crazy, I'd be like, yeah, you know what? That's not illogical.
Yeah.
Like, Will Barton very well may be a better
Yeah.
player than Harrison Barnes. It's just really the fact that Harrison Barnes has a bit more offensive potential, and that's all it really comes down to at that point. But overall, yeah, they are pretty, I guess, similar, and they're pretty good two-way players. It's just like I said, Barton's a bit better offensively, but in terms of consistency, I would almost say Barton's probably the better option. So I wouldn't disagree with anyone who says Barton's like top 13 kind of small forward, honestly.
We'll see. People let us know. People are definitely heated as they are fans of their team.
For the
So
record,
let us know. Let us know what you think.
I had him outside the top
Subscribe.
20, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, don't say that. They're gonna kill us.
No, I
Don't
actually,
worry, I saved you again.
let's see
Uh,
here. To confirm, I had Mr. Will Barton at 21st.
Okay. So that's exactly what we had. Otto Porter Jr. I think of them as similar players as well.
Definitely.
Just that Will Barton was playing on a winning team last year, and that's what gave him the separation to me.
Yeah, and I mean, if Barton goes down a bit, I would see exactly him basically just replacing that Otto Porter Jr. because Michael Porter Jr. gets a bit more minutes, but still not a bad player.
Yep, and he's not that old either. So let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Have a healthy season. Prove the doubters wrong. Keep your spot.
Absolutely. But that is it for now. We are going to take a break and come back with the top 15 in the next couple of days. We went through 25 to 16, talked about a couple guys who missed the list. From there, and like I said, we're going to get into the top 15 next time. Let us know what you guys think, who's going to be on the list, who's number one, who's number two, etc. We would appreciate if you subscribe, comment, anything it may be. Have yourself a good night. Anything to say yourself?
Like, comment, subscribe. If you think that we're idiots, tell us we're idiots. We'll argue with you. I like arguing. Don't worry.
And if you haven't, make sure you go look up our Carmelo Anthony video because
Oh, I love it. Best one yet. Big fan. Big fan.
our best video yet for sure. Anyways, good.
Peace.